Hey, it's Sheila, daughter of God. I was wanting to come on here this morning and share with you about my near-death experience I had when I was about 6 years old. And there's probably going to end up being a part 1, 2, 3, and 4 to this. It's a little bit of a long story, but I think I have probably shared with you in previous videos that, I had a little bit of a hard time growing up. It was rough. A lot of people have similar stories to mine, and they made it through too. Every day I pray that God will help those who are being suppressed, neglected, exploited, abused, that they would be a living testimony to who God is in times of trouble. And I pray that because I know that God let me live, and God let me live to be a living testimony to who He is in times of trouble. In life, things can get super hard, and there's times where we just feel like there's these chains on us, and they can't seem to be broken. But even while we're in those chains, God is there. And you say, why does God let things happen to His children? His children that love Him are ultimately going to withstand the test of time. Why does He allow these bad things to happen? I don't know. I don't know why He lets them happen. I just know that He allowed me to live through it. And He allowed me to be here today to share with you what He did for me. I was about 6 years old. And I'll go back and forth. But the story's going to begin and end. But I was about 6 years old. And I have been enduring some great trials. I was an abused child. As a lot of you have been abused children, you can probably understand where I'm coming from when I say this. I still say that, the hardest time, the most difficult time I think I've ever had in my life was when I was 6 years old. Or, not just age 6, but from the age of about 4 years old up until I was about 11 and a half, almost 12 years old. Those were the hardest years of my life. I endured the most during those times. And even later on as a teenager who was raped and molested, even the rape and molestation wasn't as bad as what I went through as a little girl. And it's amazing how the enemy always preys on the innocent, the helpless, those who don't know how to fight yet. That's the enemy preys on them. He tries to break your spirit before you're old enough to recognize who he is. So anyhow, I was about 6 years old, and my twin sister had come to me, and she had said, "Sheila, do you ever think we're going to get out of this situation?" And I told her at the age of 6 years old, I said, "Sherry, we're never going to get out. We're never going to get out. We just have to take it until we die." And that was the hardest thing I ever had to say to my sister. And at the age of 6 years old, she probably had never heard, or she had probably, at the age of 6 years old, she had probably not heard me tell her that I loved her in at least 2 years. I wanted to tell her, but I was afraid that my abuser would find out that I told her that I loved her. Because love gives hope, and our abusers know that hope is what's going to help us survive and give us strength in bad situations. So we're not allowed to have hope. Victims are not allowed to have hope. The abuser will come in and try to take that hope from you each and every time. So we were in what we called the playroom in the basement when my sister asked me this, and I remember I was sitting on a punching bag. The punching bag was laid on the floor, and I was straddling it like you would straddle a horse. And I had told her this, and I told her, I said, don't you let her see you cry. Whatever you do, don't you let her see you cry. And at the age of 6 years old, I had to learn not to cry, which is fine. Even though I did cry. You can only endure so much without crying. But I remember toughening up and trying not to cry. And it was this day when I had to tell my sister, my twin sister, that we would never get out. It was this day that I decided to take my life. I had prayed that God would take my life plenty of times before this day. And he never would. So this was my only shot. This was my only chance at ending the pain for good. That, not to have to endure another second, another minute, another moment of what we were going through. And it was pretty bad. But, I had already dealt with pain every single day. And I knew I could deal with a lot. But I didn't want to go out in pain. I had heard that taking pills, if you took enough pills, you would just fall asleep. You would just fall asleep instead of having to endure pain. And that's what I had hoped for. But I was 6 years old, and I didn't know what pills would work or what pills wouldn't. All I knew is I needed to take the pills that the adults took, and the adults took Advil. And so that evening I had went into the kitchen, into the medicine drawer, and I had grabbed a bottle of Advil. And from what I recall, I took over half the bottle. It was practically a brand new bottle, and I took over half the bottle of pills. And that night, my abuser, that night my abuser had me in her room, and she was enormous. She weighed about 400 pounds. She had me in her room, and it was probably about 11, 12 o'clock at midnight, and she had us scratching her enormous body. And to us, 400 pounds, when you only weigh like 70 pounds or less, was enormous. It was like a giant, Our abuser was a giant, and she used to make us scratch her back and scratch her legs, and she would, completely get naked and make us do these things. And it was this night that I had accidentally fallen asleep on my abuser while scratching her enormous back. And when I fell asleep on her, an angel had come to the bedroom window. And I remember looking at myself, seeing that I was asleep on my abuser, and thinking, oh, I'm going to get in trouble. Oh, I better start scratching again. And, but I never did. The angel, who was beautiful, she stood tall and thin. She had blonde hair, and she had a glow. She had this radiance around her that just glowed. And the way she presented herself to me was that she was my mother. She was an angel, like a mothering angel. And I wasn't scared by no means. She was just so beautiful. And I thought, she's coming to take me home. And oh my God, finally this is going to end. And she held out her hand to me. And even though I saw my body laying on my abuser, I walked over to her and I grabbed her hand, and we went to heaven. And heaven was beautiful. I remember I remember it briefly because I'm 38 years old now, but I was 6 then, and I've recalled the event many a times throughout the years. But I was there in heaven, and the angel had brought me to my book of life. And in the book of life, she showed me what my future would hold. And I remember being very excited because in the book of life it said I was going to have daughters. I was going to have beautiful daughters. And I remember that a man was going to love me, and that someone was going to love me in the future. And I remember being very excited about it. I couldn't wait for it to happen. And what I remembered most was God was going to deliver me from where I was at with my abuser at the time. And I was happy about that. It gave me hope. It gave me hope that it was going to end. The abuse was going to end. And when I stood looking at my book of life, my story of life, I remember being very excited. I remember smiling because it gave me hope. And